Hello there, and welcome to a very special episode of the Untitled Film Podcast with Callum and Johnny, and a special guest.
Who could that special guest be? Could it be our magic man behind the scenes, the man that makes us sound excellent and sexy rather than reedy and thin? Is it the man behind the curtain, the Wizard of Oz, Rob Hardstone?
How am I supposed to possibly live up to that expectation? But
you are the man behind the curtain.
Yeah.
Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain, except for today. Today you're allowed to.
Yeah, except for today. I'm here today. I'm here. Hi.
And how are we doing, Rob? How are you feeling about being a guest, a super special guest?
I don't know what's more anxiety-inducing, the fact this is my first time on a podcast, or my anxiety for you letting someone that knows nothing about film on your film podcast.
Just wait until we let you introduce one of the films and do the plot summary.
Fuck off, am I doing that?
I think that's unfair. I think you know more about films than you say.
At least let on. I mean,
Okay.
At least more than your brother Dave,
I was
who
gonna
we
say-
hope to get in the future, who knows absolutely nothing.
Hey, David's seen at least 3 films ever.
Wow.
At least.
And he is seeing Barbie, so...
He is going to see Barbie, so hopefully he'll have some thoughts for us.
Yeah,
Yes.
depends on the day that he sees it. We might get into...
Depending on the day, we might get him to sneak in a little sneaky 30-second review.
Well, I'm sure he'll be very much up for that.
I'll be thrilled.
Anyway. So we are going to probably post some bits and pieces from this podcast, as it's a special one, on our social medias. And Callum, as ever, what are our social medias?
Well, you can find us on Instagram and on Facebook on Untitled Film Podcast. You cannot find us on Twitter or Threads because we do not like that dastardly Mark Zuckerberg and that mean old Elon Musk. Boo, hiss.
Although Facebook and Instagram are also owned by Mark Zuckerberg, but we'll just skirt over that fact.
Don't point that out. Okay.
And there might be some form of new social media that we're going to be going on soon. Rob, would you like to tell us more about that, as we're going to put you in charge of it as your youth?
Yeah, the only way people will ever find anything anymore is through TikTok. So we're going to look at maybe doing some stuff for there. I might try and get Johnny to do some dances, maybe some lip syncs. It's going to be great. No,
Well, Johnny can do the one dance that he can do, the arm. And he always does it during the scores time. Like, so what's this score for the film? Floppy arms.
But yeah, I will find a way to post some kind of clips on there just to try and reach some new people. It'll be fun. If we can do it the way I think we can do it, it will be pretty cool.
Well, you're down with the kids. You're into your hippity hop music and your MySpace. So we're going to put you in charge of that because we're old men. And we don't know anything.
I've got the Bebo. I'm good.
You got the lingo.
Very good. So this week's episode there's a reason we've got Rob on. It is a big event, possibly the biggest event in cinematic history, some would argue. There has been 2 movies that couldn't be more different, although there are some similarities. The main one being that they're both produced by a director come producer power couple. Did you know that?
Yeah, it was Emma Thomas is Christopher Nolan's producer and they're married. And Barbie is co-written by Greta Gerwig and her husband, Noah Baumbach, who, of course, very celebrated filmmakers, lots of awards between them.
And also, the production company that produced it is Margot Robbie's production company, and that is also run with her husband.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So both of them are a bit of family affairs.
Very sweet. That's very nice.
Yeah. But yeah, it's the cinematic event of the summer. We saw both of them yesterday. In theory, we were going to record this after them, but beers ensued, as often they do after movies. So,
yeah, we'll go for just one after the films. It'll be fine.
1 became 3 and 3 became home at 10 o'clock. Yeah, we weren't like blackout drunk or anything. We just a little bit tipsy wandering home.
So instead, we've brought out the old Zencaster and we're doing a nice remote record. But no, so we are going to be talking about both Oppenheimer and Barbie, and I think we should probably talk about them in the order that we saw them. I think that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's the best way to do it, I think.
There's a lot of debate about which way around you should see these films, and having now seen these films, I think we did it the right way.
Absolutely.
So definitely. I think Barbie was very good dessert after Oppenheimer. Quite heavy.
Oppenheimer's heavy and long, and then a nice a souffle to finish the day off with Barbie. I would definitely do. I can't imagine seeing Barbie and being in that happy headspace, and then going and walking in and watching Oppenheimer and being
coming out with a skip in your step and into the destruction of Nagasaki and Hiroshima.
It's basically like skipping into the mouth of a lion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But no, so I definitely think that despite the name Barbenheimer, it should definitely be Oppen Barbie, or however you would do it instead, because that's the way around to see it. So first off, we're going to talk about Oppenheimer. And Rob, would you like to know? Catherine, do you want to do the honours in this one? Or shall I?
Yeah, sure. I don't mind. So Oppenheimer is a biopic about Robert Oppenheimer, I'm getting his first name now, the father of the atomic bomb, and it takes us through his childhood, his early days in Cambridge, skipping along that.
But because it's not his childhood, it doesn't really go much into
his university years, university years in Cambridge. But because it's a Christopher Nolan film, we jump around between different timelines. So the framing device around which this is based is two kind of hearings. One of which with the character of Robert Downey Jr., who played a man who hired him at one point, and one that's in a big kind of huge kind of public hearing, lots of people listening, and then there's a teeny tiny private one with just Oppenheimer and various people defending him or against him in a small room with about 10 or so people all grilling him. And it goes through the time in Los Alamos in the New Mexico, where he was hired to basically to come up with an atomic bomb before the Germans could. But then his politics gets tangled up, his affiliations with left-wing politics and the Communist Party, about whether he was or wasn't a communist, and whether after the events at Los Alamos and the Second World War, whether he then was responsible for secrets leaking out about atomic weapons getting to the Soviet Union. So, guys, I don't know who wants to take the honor first. And Rob, do you want to take the honor first?
You should.
What did you think about Oppenheimer?
Yeah, it was all right. No, I really enjoyed it. It was a Christopher Nolan film. What more is there to say? It was very, very well shot, visually really, really good, but a little bit all over the place in terms of plot. Like you said, it was kind of going back and forth a lot between this kind of courtroom drama and the actual building of the bomb. But yeah, no, really enjoyable, but I think you'll both agree it's a little bit too long. Definitely a little bit too long.
Yes, and Rob was a little bit late because getting here, there was horrible traffic, and then there was a fire, a coach caught on fire. So you would have arrived just on time for the film, were it not for that. But I think you arrived about 20 minutes late, so you missed all the stuff in Cambridge. And frankly, you didn't miss anything because that was boilerplate biopic stuff, and even missing that you conclude that it's still too long shows that there is a problem. Is that it's indulgent. It's not that any one element is bad. It's just that every element we see it kind of worked through and overanalyzed to the point where it's like watching a dissected corpse almost. Like, we're watching a very stately thing. We're watching a very statuesque thing that's very handsomely presented, but almost nothing there with a pulse or a heart, or it was an academic exercise in dissecting the frog. And I think that's become a problem of late with Christopher Nolan, is that no one's going to tell him no, because his films are usually hits. So people are allowing him to do the thing that he does, and it just becomes too much. Like you said, it's a heaping bowl of stuff. It was like someone told me, eat your vegetables before Barbie. Okay, fine. And then someone presenting you with a entire bowl full of steamed carrots and broccoli, which is fine in small doses, but after
you
a
have to eat
while,
all of them.
all of the steamed broccoli and carrots, it's like, this is good for you, all right? This is an important film. And eventually it's just like, I can't do this anymore. It's too much. And it's flavorless. So Johnny, what do you think?
Yeah, it was all right. I think my thoughts on Chris Nolan are very well known to avid listeners of this podcast. I think he's overrated. I'm just going to put that out there. And this film did nothing to dispel that. I think certainly of his recent films, my favourite by far is Dunkirk. And I think that is primarily down to the lack of dialogue. And I think this is a really big issue with Chris Nolan's films. I find his dialogue really stunted. And really, it almost feels like Wes Anderson dialogue without the stylization. Like, it's very kind of like, yes, this is me reading a script, and I'm also reading a script. But this is a script, and this is also a script. And it just feels incredibly stilted. And like, anytime there tries to be a whippy quip, like, most of them don't land that well. 100% agree with both of you that there's 2 hours of a really good movie in there, but there's an hour of just stuff that doesn't work. And because of that, it kind of absolutely fucks up the pacing. Like, the first half an hour just is pretty much not needed, could be done in 5 minutes. And then obviously, like, the thing that Oppenheimer is known for is creating the atomic bomb. And the thing that happened, and the thing that was in all the trailers, like, this is when the world changes, 2 minutes until the world changes. Once the genie is out of the bottle, the world changes. And yet the world changes, and then there's another 45 minutes of a courtroom drama afterwards. Like, it just doesn't really mesh together in the way that I want it to. Having said that, is it on the metrics of a good movie? Is it a good movie? I would say good, not excellent, but it's a good movie. It is incredibly well shot. Something none of us have really mentioned yet. Actually, the acting is great.
Yeah, very, very good.
Yes, and it's good to see Cillian Murphy, who's been the bridesmaid of Christopher Nolan for a long time. He's been a supporting character in something like 6 of his films now, and he's never quite got the leading man, and then now is this big chance, and he absolutely brings it home.
But I also like to say RDJ, Robert Downey Jr., absolutely smashed it. Arguably the better performance, although obviously the whole weight of the film was on Cillian's shoulders, so, fair play to him. And Matt Damon was good as well. There was a lot of like tiny little cameos where the actors were good. Although, again, it slightly takes you out when you see Rami Malek. I don't think I'm giving too much away of this film, because most people know what happens is there's an atomic bomb and there's a court hearing. But at the start, when you see Rami Malek in the film for about 30 seconds, you think, well, he's probably going to show up in some important role later on.
I don't think he even says anything in his initial scene.
No, I think he just stands there with a clipboard. And then the second time he's there, he gets the clipboard thrown at him, and then he's seen a bit more.
And there is a troubling aspect. Both of the female roles in this film are well played. They're good actors. Florence Pugh plays Oppenheimer's first wife.
Funny two-dimensional characters.
And then Emily Blunt plays the second wife. But they are mere ciphers through which Oppenheimer views his own trauma. And they do get nothing to do.
Which is a Chris Nolan problem.
A bigger Chris Nolan problem is that he's fond of killing off his wives.
We didn't actually kill off his wife in this one.
No, he
killed off his girlfriend.
Which
is what happens in history, I suppose.
Which did happen in history, but it is starting to get like, you okay, Chris?
But there is, again, it's always hard to know where is the line with a biopic or what you're giving away. There's an incredibly uncomfortable sex scene.
Yeah.
Like, incredibly uncomfortable and unjustifiably so. Like, there's no need for it to be in the film. Like, I kind of get what he was going at, but it just feels tonally different. And again, it doesn't disseminate from that kind of like, does Chris Nolan actually just not like women? It kind of feels like that.
And Emily Blunt, every time Emily Blunt's in the film, she's slugging on her hip flask or her martini and scowling at Cillian Murphy to the point where you go, maybe they should just get a divorce. They're not good for each other. But
interestingly enough, I was listening to a podcast about Oppenheimer last night, and actually the film seems to be, it might have been kind to her. So apparently,
really?
Yeah, she again, this is obviously from what the scientists have said about her when they've been talking about her afterwards and things. So you've got to take it with a pinch of salt.
Sure, of course.
Obviously, you don't know what goes on in someone's relationship behind closed doors, but she apparently was a drunk. She didn't really have any form of mothering instinct, which I'm not saying necessarily, not everyone does, but like she did kind of like, don't really want to look after my kids vibe. And she also apparently was very like, she fell out with everyone and was very like acid tongued. So maybe there's some truth to the character, but anyway, yeah, it's not exactly I think if it was just in this film and every other film that Chris Nolan had ever done, that all the female characters were well written, well-rounded individuals that, but actually they're always just two-dimensional side characters that get bumped off pretty quick and often aren't shown in the greatest of light. I think there's a bit of a pattern here.
Mm-hmm. Yes, agreed.
Also, it's got a well-dressed white man at the centre of it. I know Tennant was a well-dressed black man, but for the most part,
he likes
a well-dressed white man.
White men in suits. So, Rob, do you have any summarising thoughts?
I'd say it's definitely worth a watch, especially if you like Christopher Nolan's films. I think it's up there with his better films. Mm-hmm. But yeah, the pacing, it's just, especially in that last act, it's just all over the place. You're kind of like, well, why are we still here? Nothing that major is going to happen now.
Yes.
So what are we still here for? And then it just kind of ends.
Ooh, will they revoke his security clearance? Oh no!
And the middle third of the film is very tight. It almost frames it like a heist film. Like,
it feels like really
we got to get the bomb out. We've got to get the bomb out before the Germans. And it's like this music, it's like ramping up. I thought, this is like getting near to a panic attack. If they keep this pace up for 3 hours, that would be incredible. And then they don't.
I'd just like to put out a nice little plug as well for Ludwig Ransom's music again. He used him first in Tenet. And he's done like Black Panther and quite a few other things. I think he did Last of Us and Mandalorian. He definitely did. I just really think he's top of his game. One of the best soundtrack people in soundtrack land.
In soundtrack land, yes.
Soundtrack land,
which is adjacent to Barbie land.
Exactly. And yeah, that the music was one of the things. I feel like if it had a Hans Zimmer score, the film would have felt very different. It wouldn't have. He's a lot more claustrophobic. He almost feels like a horror movie kind of music.
Yes, very overbearing.
At times, very overbearing, and it does. And that's the best. And that's why I think it'd be a better tight 2-hour film, because the bits where they were building the bomb were tight and were exciting, and we knew what the outcome was going to be, but you still managed to hold you on the edge of your seat. And everything else around it just didn't work. And that's the issue. I think if they'd have made a film that had 15 minutes of his early life, then an hour and a half of making the bomb, and then 15 minutes of them like tearing him down at the end, with maybe a few flashbacks and flash forwards intersected in that middle 90 minutes, it would be a much better movie.
Yes, very much so.
But unfortunately, you got an hour of them making the bomb, an hour of a court case, and an hour of young Oppenheimer.
Yeah, and the thing is, they did intersect it throughout the film, but then when you get the big explosion, spoiler alert, they succeeded and made a nuke. When they did that, then it just becomes a courtroom drama. So all the intersection kind of stops. So it's like, oh, okay,
yeah,
couldn't find a place for this in the rest of the film then.
Yeah, exactly. Editing was a bit weird.
The editing in general was weird. Like in the first kind of like half an hour, they did this like trope where they would. I use trope today, not you, Callum. Where they would kind of like have these bits of, I don't know, like looks like particles under an electron microscope or something, like superseded over the top of like pictures of Oppenheimer, like being in bed, like shivering and stuff. And they kind of did that for like half an hour, and then they were like, well, done with that. And then it didn't really do it for the rest of the film, but it didn't really explain why it was doing it in any kind of concrete way that was justifiably made sense.
It had a hard time getting under the skin of the man in general. Like in the early third, he poisons the apple of one of his lecturers, one of his tutors, who chewed him out. And you think this is interesting. I want to hear about this. This man might be a little bit unhinged. And no, not that interested. It's not that interesting.
If you look at Oppenheimer, if you look at Oppenheimer's history, he was quite an unhinged, certainly young man. But even when he was older, he was a bit, he was very... saw the world in a different way to a lot of people, and
It's interested in depicting. It's not interested in asking why. And I think that's the problem for a biopic.
And I think that's the other thing is they very surfacefully talk about the bomb and was it the right thing to do? Is it the wrong thing to do? Some scientists think this, some scientists think that. But it could have been a much cleverer movie in that it could have talked about that in a lot more depth.
Yes.
But it just didn't. It's very surface.
Or whether it was really a deterrent to drop 2 bombs on Japan, or whether they were just doing it out of revenge.
Whether they could have dropped one in a small military installation and killed a few people and said, but we've got more of these if you guys don't surrender now. Yeah, exactly that. There's a lot more depth to it than they. Yeah, it was. There's not much depth to it. It's a very surface A to B biopic that's too long, and it's well put together, well acted. If you don't know much about Oppenheimer, will teach you a lot. Although you have to take some of it with a pinch of salt. But its pacing, its editing, everything is a mess. That would be my sum up.
Very good. Yes.
And I think, unless either of you guys got anything more to add?
I think I've certainly covered all my bases. What about you, Rob?
Yeah, no, I'm happy with that and not much more to add, really.
I think that then takes us nicely to an advertisement break. I'd buy that for $1.
I'd buy that for $1. You got to do it with a rasp.
No.
I'm not doing it.
Go on.
Don't do it. Don't do it, Rob. And edit Callum's one out.
I'm going to edit all of it out.
No!
I have complete
That's
power.
going to start out. You'll just start from, I'm going to edit everything out, and it'll just go on from there.
Or maybe I'll put it in at like 5 times speed so you can't quite hear it.
Anyway, after our review of Oppenheimer, I think it's time to go into the pudding, the dessert, the Barbie-licious. Get some Kenergy going. So, how do you even describe Barbie? So, Barbie, I feel like I don't need to describe who or what Barbie is. I think most people listening to this podcast have a base knowledge of life and existence, and we know who and what Barbie is. So, Barbie is a person who is a toy, but she's not a toy. She lives in Barbie land with a whole host of other Barbies. There's President Barbie, there's Dr. Barbie, there's Lawyer Barbie, there's Supreme Court Justices Barbie. She lives in Barbie land, and it's a perfect matriarchal society. And it's also filled with Kens who are shunned, thrown aside at the whim of the Barbies. The only thing they care about is making the Barbies happy and being seen and being found by the Barbies. But our protagonist Barbie is the stereotypical Barbie. She's the OG Barbie, which is shown in the first opening sequence of the film is a 2001 A Space Odyssey kind of takeoff. And it has actually her as the original Barbie with the original Barbie outfit on at the start of the film. So she's meant to be like the OG original Barbie. But one day she gets up and Barbie's perfect Barbie land life doesn't seem quite so perfect. First off, she starts thinking about death, to the shock and chagrin of all the other Barbies. Then she wakes up and goes for her morning shower, and the water's cold. She then goes to float off her roof like she does every day, and then falls onto the floor, and she realizes something isn't up. And then finally, her heels touch the ground. Dum, dum, dum. And she goes to see Strange Barbie, who says she has to go back to the real world and find her user, is that the word? Adult, player, child?
The person who
plays with her?
Yes.
Anyway, and restore the link between the two. And hilarity ensues. So, Robert, what did you think?
I really, really enjoyed it. I had a feeling I was going to enjoy it, but I enjoyed it way more than I thought I was going to. Especially, as you say, like as a pudding after Oppenheimer. It was very light. It was very funny. Very, very funny. Doesn't get dragged down in itself. Doesn't take itself seriously at all, and until the plot's where it needs to. But yeah, I really, really enjoyed it.
Callum?
No, I agreed. It's very nimble. It manages to have its cake and eat it because it's directed by Greta Gerwig, who of course directed the most recent Little Women, the version of Little Women that came out a few years ago, ironically with Florence Pugh. She directed Lady Bird. She was an actress before that. She's a very smart person, and she co-wrote it with her husband Noah Baumbach, who I think has won a couple of Oscars. And what they managed to do is wrestle this complicated history of Barbie. So on one hand, if she were a real person, she wouldn't be able to sustain her legs and her stomach. Her stomach is too small to be sustained, and her legs are too long to stand up. But yet she can also fly to the moon. She can also be a chef or a senator or a president. And it's done in a completely capitalistic way. The company of Mattel, they're not putting out these toys to President Barbie in order to inspire little girls, despite what they say. They're doing it to sell more toys. But for the 15-year-old girls who remember having a Barbie when they were 8, or the 30-year-old audience members, the millennial women who remember being an 8-year-old girl and being inspired by Barbie, it is a complicated history. And what they managed to do is have their cake and eat it. Firstly, it has a very Simpsons-esque sense of humor, where in the way that Simpsons bites the hand that feeds it, like they'll make a lot of jokes about Fox. This has a lot of fun, making fun of both the Barbie world, the Kens, how ridiculous all this is. Mattel, they very much
Warner Brothers.
They bite the hand biting the hand that feeds it. Nothing. This is chomping on the hand that feeds it. Yet it also knows that the audience who came to see this film probably remembers owning a Barbie when they were 6 or 7 and thinking that this is the best thing in the world. And to those audiences, this is not ironic. This is not a joke. This was a wonderful thing that I had. It manages to wrestle and walk that line very finely, but in a way that it doesn't feel like it's soapboxing or lecturing, as you say. When it gets serious, it does get very serious. It's a very feminist-friendly film, especially the character played by America Ferrera, who is the mother of the mother of the teenage girl who owns the Barbie and is brought into Barbie Land, and she's part of the reason why the Barbies and the Kens start to revolutionize and kind of shrug off the shackles of the very stereotypical views of manhood and womanhood that they've has been forced upon them. It manages to do all the things by walking a very fine line between being light, by being serious, by biting the hand, by being sincere, by being ironic, which is why I think it's become the big hit of the summer. It's a 4-quadrant blockbuster in the ways that, by God, they just don't make them like that anymore. Everyone can come into this film in the way that everyone in the 90s could watch The Simpsons, and someone is going to get something out of it, that everyone's going to get something out of it. Even 3 blokes like us, who really have no right to talk about feminism in any way without kind of being very careful. We were laughing our heads off from minute 1 to minute 120, and it just did it all perfectly, or mostly perfectly. I will say I'll leave some tiny reservations for after you've spoken. So, Johnny, what did you think?
Yeah, it was all right.
Fuck's sake.
Son of a bitch.
Well, Ben Shapiro hated it, so even if it was bad, I'd love it.
Yeah.
But no, it is. Yeah, it's pretty good. I remember when the first trailers came out, and I was like, "This is either going to be fucking genius, or it's going to miss the mark so horrendously," and it is genius. And I think what they meant, the way they managed to, I think Callum's right. It did really walk that tightrope of like not taking the piss out of Barbie as a concept and as a whole, and taking the piss out of people's childhoods, because people wouldn't like that, but also kind of like putting it into the context of a modern world, and maybe even finding a place for Barbie in a modern world. And I think it did that incredibly smartly, and partially it did that through detail. So I've watched a couple of featurettes and things about like the production design and stuff, and every single thing you see in it, every character, every piece, item of clothing, every like Malibu beach house, whatever, they are all stuff from Barbie's history. So anyone who's a Barbie fan's watching it going, yeah, I remember that. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, I remember that. So it grounds it in like, the people care about this. but also they know, having a toy that is like so idealistically unrealistic for a person to look like and stuff, probably did give some people negative self-worth, and probably isn't always the best role model. So it kind of fleshed out the Barbie character in a way that it makes it more so. So no, I really liked it. The jokes all hit. They were hilarious. It was very self-knowing. There's a bit in it where they're talking about like getting cellulite and like not looking as good, and then the narrator, played by Helen Mirren, kind of speaks up and says, "Note to the producers, maybe don't get Margot Robbie to play this role if that's the message you're trying to get across." and there's loads of little bits like that. It's incredibly cine literate. There's a lot of cinema jokes, so you can tell it's made by people that like films. And again, all these things help broaden the audience, because on the face of it, it's a Barbie movie. It should be for like the 9 to 14-year-old girls. It's clearly not a movie for 9 to 14-year-old girls. I'd say probably like 14 is about the lowest age that they should.
I think it was rated at 12, wasn't it?
It's rated 12A.
Yeah.
It's 12A. So in theory, adult could take younger kids with them, but yeah, I probably wouldn't, if I had a daughter, wouldn't want one less than like 14 seeing it, I would say. So it's obviously designed for an older section of the market. But that, I think 14 and up, male or female, will all find something in it, whether it's the jokes, whether it's the kind of the cinema references, whether it's the attention to detail, whether it's just the world and being taken away on a magical story, whether it's the social commentary. Like, there's so much in there, and it all works. Like, it only needed one or two elements to really fall apart for it to not work at all as a movie, and every element, I think, works. Yeah, okay, is it perfect? No. Is it like 100? Is it 100%? No, but it's pretty darn close, and pretty darn closer than any Barbie movie probably should be. So yeah, I think they knocked it out of the park.
No, exactly. For just a minor reservation, I remember when you came out of the cinema and said it did have 4 endings or 5 endings, and it could have done with 1. And I get it why there is 4 endings, is because they've got to wrap up the Kens, they've got to wrap up the Mattel storyline, they've got to wrap up the Barbie Land storyline, they've got to wrap up the storyline with the real world girl and her mum, and then they've got to wrap up the storyline with the OG Barbie. But they do them all individually, like 1 ending, 2 ending, 3 ending, 4, 5 ending, 6 ending, 7 ending more, where they maybe could have found a way to wrap up at least a few of the minor or supporting character stories in 1, and then leave the main Barbie to kind of have her own kind of space to have her own thing. But teeny tiny, this is nitpicking just for the sake of being fair, I think.
Yeah, I would agree. And it could have been, it is a 2-hour movie as well, or an hour and 56 minutes. It probably could have been 10, 15 minutes shorter, but I say that about every movie that's over 90 minutes.
Yes, you do. And Rob, anything more to add?
Not so much. Just the humor was completely spot on. Will Ferrell was amazing.
Yeah, he was.
Ryan Gosling, incredible. Yeah, just overall a really, really fun film.
Yes, and do look out for the cameos. We're particularly tickled by Rob Brydon, Britain's own Rob Brydon, as Sugar Daddy Ken. So that was fun. And there are many more cameos.
Just to be clear, daddy of a dog called Sugar, not a sugar daddy.
Yes.
Oh, of course. Yes,
of course, yes.
A clear distinction that needs to be made.
But no, absolutely. It's, I think it is really, really good. Just around, I really think the humour is funny. We all said when we came out of the cinema that we hadn't seen Will Ferrell in anything really funny for a while, and he was so perfect for this role. Like, Will Ferrell does that kind of like what's the word I'm looking for? Like undeserving pomposity so well. Like, like
every single line he had was a joke, and every one of those jokes was funny.
Yeah, yes, absolutely.
It's quite similar to the role he plays in Zoolander, playing a kind of pompous, undeservingly pompous villain.
Very true. Yeah.
But it's what he does. Like, he's just really good at being really pompous and really up his own arse, but through no reason to deserve to be that. Like, yeah. But again, he was quite. Yeah, I think the other thing is there's no real villains in this movie. Like no one is made out to be the bad person, and that's quite nice. It's just quite a nice little world to live in.
Yes. I really thought they were setting up Mattel to be the big bad, but they weren't. No, it wasn't that one-dimensional at all.
No, it was a lot more rounded than that. Again, I don't give too much of it away, but yeah, it is. It's nice and well-rounded. So I really loved it. I would highly recommend.
Highly recommend too. Yes.
Perfect.
That's three lads' opinions about the feminist masterpiece that is Barbie.
Absolutely. So, I think we should do some scores and some wrap-ups. So, Robert, or Rob, or R, or whatever you'd like to be called today.
The man behind the curtain.
Yeah, I'll take man behind the curtain.
Okay, man behind the curtain. Man behind. NBC.
That's a cool nickname.
So, NBC, what do you think about Oppenheimer? What would you score it as? What are your thoughts?
So my thoughts are it's definitely worth a watch to probably anyone that enjoys films. I don't know how much I would have enjoyed it if it wasn't in the cinema. I think it was at home watch. It might have fallen a bit flatter than it did. But I'd say a solid 7, I think, for Oppenheimer.
I think that's a fair score. And Callum?
Yeah, I'm going to have to be unoriginal and say that my score is quite the same. 7. It's very cinematic because of Christopher Nolan does that very well. His cinematography is always really solid, and having IMAX show faces, not just vistas. Like it does get a lot of vistas out of the New Mexico desert, but a lot of the film is just close in on Cillian Murphy's blue eyes panicking in that kind of way that he does, and see those so large in such a crystal clear definition. That alone is worth the price of admission. I'm not sure, as you say, Rob, at home, if you were watching this on a laptop or even on a decent sized television, 4K television, it might not quite have the same oomph. And I think that's where a lot of Christopher Nolan films fall down. Their cinema releases, DVD is an afterthought, or DVD, 4K is an afterthought. And it is too long, it's too baggy. And I think for that 7 as well, I think a 7 is the kind of perfect score for it.
I agree with all of what you both have said. I think if you'd literally have stuck the microphone in front of me when we walked out of that cinema yesterday, and before I'd seen Barbie, I probably would have given it an 8. But the more I've thought about it, the more I've been like, that is just too long, and that bit was boring. And that sex scene, fucking hell, why was that there?
That really did take you out of the entire film, and it's very hard to get back in again afterwards.
Yeah, it really was. It was just awkward. And yeah, funny enough, I was listening to the soundtrack this morning, and literally where the Trinity test is, and then there's like it's about 13 or 14 songs into the soundtrack, and then there's 9 more songs afterwards, and that just tells you all you need to know.
Yeah, that says it all. Yeah,
But yeah, it's well acted. It's a good biopic. It's not going to be 3 hours of your time wasted. It's maybe 45 minutes of your time wasted. But again, I agree with both of you. Like, actually, do I see myself like watching it on a rainy Sunday, which I might do with Inception, or I might do with some of the others. But obviously this is like, doesn't really have many set pieces in, which is kind of, sometimes when you get a slightly boring Chris Nolan film like Tenet, the set pieces are what keep you going, and this didn't have those. And I don't think the script was good enough to overtake it. So yeah, I think it is only a 7. Yeah, I agree. So let's go to Callum first this time. We'll swap it around. Callum, what are your scores for Barbarella?
Well, for Barbie, I think that it's manages to have its cake and eat it. It's both light and serious. It bites the hand that feeds it, but it's celebratory. Its cast are all great. We didn't even talk all that much about how good Ryan Gosling is as the leader of the Kens. And, I wouldn't be surprised if he got a sneaky Oscar nomination. It's moving when it should be. It's very funny throughout. It's probably the funniest film I've seen in a long time, where there are gut belly laughs from minute 1 to minute 120. It has, ironically, one of the best set pieces of the year with the Ken all-out war, the war of the Kens, and then the subsequent dance sequence that is going to stay in my mind for a long time. It's just good fun. As the Beach Boys song that played on the first trailer, it's fun. So it's 9 out of 10.
Excellent. And NBC.
I fully agree with everything Callum said. The only real downsides to it I could find was, like you said, about 4 different endings. And I think the initial setup as well, I know it's not that kind of movie, but they didn't really explain the link between Barbie's world and our world in a way that felt satisfying to me, which is fine. It's not that kind of movie, but I would have liked a little bit more behind the curtain on that. But I'd agree. I'd say a 9 as well.
I also agree with both of what you've both said again. I think my biggest criticism, I think there's too many endings. I think it could have been 10 minutes shorter, probably, if you took a couple of those endings out and amalgamated them and snipped a couple of little bits out of the middle. But I mean, that's a very, very small negative. I know what you mean about the whole behind the curtain thing. Funnily enough, it did what Tenet does, where they're like 20 minutes of the film. Don't think about it too much. It doesn't matter. They kind of like sign it off, which I get. Again, they might have had to add 10 minutes more into the film to explain it. But yeah, I can see that. I think, something we haven't really talked about too much, like the production design was amazing. The world building was amazing. I just really liked it from start to finish. So yeah, I'll knock 1 point off for those, for the kind of being a bit too long and stuff. But other than that, 9 out of 10. So shockingly, we've all agreed on both films. So Oppenheimer is a 7 out of 10 and Barbie is a 9 out of 10. So I think you guys should get down and do like us and do a Barbenheimer day.
Yeah, have a Barbenheimer day. Absolutely.
I would definitely recommend that. It was a lot of fun. They really did complement each other quite well.
They did, yeah. I feel like sometimes you need that bit of like relaxation after a really like heavy, intense film where your eardrums have been blown out.
Multiple times.
Yeah. Every explosion. Whoom.
Actually, something else I just want to say. So Chris Nolan, actually, the speaking was much better than most of his recent films. Like there was no kind of like sounds of knives and forks blocking out the sounds of the things you're actually listening for. But at the start, there's a big explosion and there's a quote about Prometheus. But like half of the quote is black on orange and half of the quote is black on black, and you can't read it. And I was expecting either like it all to fade to orange or it to go up so I could read it, and it just didn't. And I was like, so you've just put half of the quote on a screen that's black on black and I can't see it. Do you just fucking hate your audiences? Do you hate them as much as you hate women, Chris Nolan? So that was, honestly, that happens, and it was like in the first 30 seconds of the film, and I was just like, for God's sake, is this what we're in for? Is this what we're in for again? Anyway, just wanted to throw that out there. But yeah, thank you very much for coming on board, Rob. And not just that, thank you for all you do in producing this podcast, because there's a lot of effort involved in that, I am sure. And we'll be back next week with a more regularly structured podcast. You may have noticed there was no news in this one. We thought we don't want to be like Chris Nolan and take too much of your time up today. Thanks very much, guys.
Thank you for having me on, guys.
You're welcome, and thank you for making us sound so sexy.
You're very welcome.
And to your audience, see you later and goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.